My name is Rabbi Sharon Cohen Anisfeld. I'm the president of Hebrew College, and we are so delighted to welcome everyone this evening and really, really honored to be hosting this book launch tonight, celebrating the publication of Radiance, Creative Mitzvah Living, the Selected Prose and Poetry of Danny Siegel. We'll have an opportunity tonight to hear from Danny Siegel himself. He'll be in conversation with Rabbi Or Rose, who is the director of our Miller Center at Hebrew College, and we'll have an opportunity to hear some comments from the editor of this wonderful volume, our friend and colleague and teacher, Rabbi Neal Gold. One of my personal favorite descriptions of the ripples that can flow from the life and work of a teacher comes from the 1989 book by Tracy Kidder called Among School Children. And in it, Kidder writes this. He says, "Good teachers put snags in the river of children passing by, and over the years they redirect hundreds of lives. Many people find it easy to imagine unseen webs of malevolent conspiracy in the world, and they are not always wrong. But there is also an innocence that conspires to hold humanity together, and it is made of people who can never fully know the good they have done." So I first met Danny Siegel, he won't remember this, but I first met him in 1978 in Jerusalem. I was 17 years old and he was already a legend then, and that was just over 40 years ago. I was on a Nifty program in Israel, and Danny took our group to Yad L'Kashish, Lifeline for the Old, a Jerusalem nonprofit that empowers low-income elderly through meaningful work opportunities. That was, again, it was a little over 40 years ago, and I can still picture Danny Siegel, first of all, in his baseball cap, I believe, simply and unpretentiously showing us what it meant to live your values. And I can still picture, even more importantly, the way that he greeted the elders as he walked through the workshop, showing us what it means to treat every human being you encounter with dignity. I share this story because I know that I am just one of, thousands, tens of thousands of young people upon whom Danny Siegel left a lasting impression without ever fully knowing the good he had done. There are arguments in the world of education about what's more important, charisma or content, high quality content, and obviously both are true. Charisma can ignite a spark and can make a piece of learning come alive, and we know there's nothing more important than good, substantive, rich content that we share with students. But to me, Danny, you embody another way, which is not just charisma and not just content, but character. And people, especially young people, know when they are in the presence of someone who is the real deal. And that's who you've always been. That's what I think has made your impact so powerful and profound, as the subtitle of the book itself implies, Creative Mitzvah Living. So I just wanted to add one more note, which that has also left an impression on me. I've heard you talk about one of the teachers, one of the mitzvah heroes, who put a snag in the river of your own life and who can never fully know the good she had done. You've spoken about this person who you met on your first mitzvah trip to Israel, Hadassah Levy, who takes in children with Down syndrome. And I've heard you say, I asked her why she did it, and she said they were babies. And those three words knocked me over. I just want to be a good person. So, Danny, thank you for showing generations of young people what it looks like to walk the walk and to make one's life a vessel for bringing goodness into the world. Thank you, Neal, so much for bringing Danny Siegel's words and life to light. And thank you for helping the light of his work and his words reach even farther and shine even more brightly in these dark times. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And now I'll introduce again Rabbi Or Rose, the director of the Miller Center at Hebrew College, who'll be in conversation with Danny this evening.
I think we should ditch the rest of the program and just let Rabbi Anasfeld continue. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Beautiful as always. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with everyone tonight to celebrate Danny's work and the publication of this wonderful book in partnership with Neal. Danny, I want to start as quickly as possible because I have many questions. Like Sharon, I met you years and years ago. In fact, you reminded me that you met me as a child in Winnipeg. And then I re-met you several more times, as Sharon said, on the streets of Jerusalem, and then in New York, and in Boston, and here we are by Zoom. So the first question I want to ask you is how you got involved in this work, in this beautiful mitzvah work. What prompted you to do so? What did you see or not see as you looked out on the Jewish landscape some 45, 50 years ago?
Well, you'll hear more of it down the road with my writing also, but depends on whether you're frum or spiritual or not. It was, by me, it was an accident a little bit. I still don't remember why in January of 1975, that instead of waiting, it was my 6th or 7th or 8th trip to Israel, instead of waiting for people to give me $1 or $2 to give away to tzedakah, I started asking people. And I had $955. The record is that there are 1,216 people who claim they gave me my first $1 out of the 955. And your question was phrased in a certain way. I wasn't looking at the whole Jewish landscape. I went, and it did not take me a long time to find out I'm not giving to institutions or whatever. I discovered Miriam Mendelow, the founder of Lifeline to the Old. The real lesson is my mother told me I had to go meet Miriam Mendelow, and you didn't mess with Edith Siegel, Aleha Shalom. And shortly after that, and then meeting Hadassah Levy, who recently passed away at the age of 88 or so. There were 3 in the first trip that stayed with me the whole time. And that's when I began to understand that it's about mitzvah heroes. And once I started with that, they don't suck you in, but you just gravitate to them and realize not only are they doing great things, but they're teaching you that anybody is capable of doing more than they ever thought they could. And once I linked onto Mitzvah Heroes, everything, well, I had been studying at the seminary, so I knew about text. So you'll hear later on as the 3 parts, the Mitzvah Heroes, Jewish text to make it Jewish, and the projects. But it was the heroes. I'm not taking super credit. I invented the term mitzvah hero, which is stuck. And that really remains accurate. There are over 100 that I've met over the years. And there's many more out there that I try to meet.
So that leads beautifully into my next question. You have been a relentless advocate for mitzvah sheroes and heroes, and they've come from a whole slew of different places, locations across the Jewish community and far beyond. So I wanted to ask you if you would share but 2 stories of those heroes, because as you said a moment ago, they've inspired so many of us across several generations now.
Okay, Tom, did I send you a photograph of Hadassah and Shmuel, or Hadassah and Kalman, that we can put up there? I would try to put them up on my screen, but that means I'll get kicked out of, in any event. You're absolutely right. This kind of work covers the whole spectrum. One of the people we've been most intensely involved with is Shmuel Munk, who lives in Bnei Brak. Two grandfathers were very famous rabbis in Germany. One apparently used to go bowling on Wednesdays with Hildesheimer. It was Saba Munk and Saba Klein. And at one point, I can't remember which grandfather said, Shmuel, you're not meant to sit in the yeshiva the whole time. You're meant to work with people. And he started working with autistic people. And then they founded Beit Cham for people with mental illness. Now, as I think we discussed privately, if you're going to work with a population, the trickiest or the hardest, I believe, are people with mental illness, because you're afraid and because you don't know what they're going to do. And yet Shmuel, whose partner was Yoram, who was an Iraqi Sephardi, and you've got a guy from Bnei Brak working together, created this great thing. And every year now, even though Shmuel's in his 80s now, every year, of course, I'd go visit him and just sit and listen to him teach Torah. He still does his daf yomi every night. And as I found out earlier, I think last summer, his wife is from Denmark. And when she was a little kid on Rosh Hashanah in 1943, she was among those who were in the fishing boats that were saved by the Swedes from the Nazis. So there's all kinds of, the best one is I said, Shmuel, now how many great-grandchildren do you have? When I'd ask the rabbinite, she'd always say, Harbe, because she didn't want to count them. But when I asked Shmuel, he reached into his pocket because a granddaughter was due any minute. So he didn't know exactly how many great-grandchildren he had. So that's what he was checking. The other is, of course, Hadassah Levi. There were over 40, she'd been in the hospital and she was sick. And when she started, very sick, and when she got well enough to walk around, she saw all these babies that had been left behind. And for whatever reason, she said, I'm going to take it, that's the rabbinite. Any luck with the other pictures? That's all right, if you don't have.
That's the one picture I do have. I'll look and see if there's
Okay.
another.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Don't be distracted.
Yes. And Hadassah Levi started walking around the hospital and saw these babies. And she started gathering. She said in a week and a half, going to various hospitals, they'd gathered like 40 of them or more. And she said, I'm going to raise them. And they are now in their 30s, living in groups, not group homes, but semi-independent apartments, all of them employed, some of them who called Hadassah Ima. She adopted only one of them. She was very charifa, very sharp. I mean, she used to call them my little Mongoloch. And she said, of all the ones I could adopt, I had to pick the dumb one. Now, only a Hadassah could do that, could get away with it. And as they say, she passed away no more than, her grandson got in touch maybe 2 weeks ago. And I recalled for him, since I don't drive in Israel, I haven't driven in Israel since 73, 74. My friend, Rabbi Ron Hoffberg, drove me to see her during the summer. She lives in Shomron. Her father had bought land there many, many years ago. And then last summer was at a rehab place where she was recovering from something. In any event, when we saw her in the home, we're sitting around having our coffee and so forth. And she paused at one point and she says, I guess I did something.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like as powerful as what Rabbi Anisfeld said. When I asked Hadassah, after many years, I said, why did you do it? And she said, they were babies.
Yeah.
You just had to do something. It's like, I think to a certain extent, when the airplanes went into the Twin Towers and anybody who had tzedakah money said, we got to do something we don't know yet. But for Hadassah, it was staring her right in the face. And we used to bring US wires, and Rabbi Hofberg, who's now in Prague, he and my friend Rabbi Edelman used to take congregational tours to Israel. And from the airport, before they went to their hotels in Jerusalem, they'd stop off to be with Hadassah's babies.
Beautiful. Tell us a little bit more about Rabbanit Bracha, since we can see her. And what is she standing in front of? What is it a picture of?
That's part of the supply of matzah. In her heyday, there were packages of 9 or 10 Pesach projects. She reached 3,500 families.
Wow.
When she passed away, her daughter Naomi took it over, and it kept going for 2 or 3 years afterwards. And the low point was like 1,000 families. And they had soldiers and students and volunteers all over the place. That's only a portion of the matzah. My friend Arnie has a picture of his kid who's now out of college when she was a little kid, climbing up practically to the ceiling with this stuff. And it's a school next to where the Rabbanit lived. And people would line up, and all with dignity, and they'd get their Pesach stuff. And when you meet the people, I mean, the daughter now used to on Friday mornings, and I went a couple of times, they had a room underneath the Rav's synagogue. You'd see people coming with the old people, and some people with a cane, all of them schlepping the carts. And they would get, a frozen chicken that a guy has been paying for years from Florida, and wine. And if they said, no, I don't need so much flour now, can I have cookies instead? And they'd go bent to the back and they'd bring out stuff. And those are the kind of people, and the old men who probably never cooked for themselves in their lives, to have a tailor-made type of package for Pesach made all the difference in the world.
Wow.
And that was just part of what she did. I mean, she was, when I think of the all-purpose, all-encompassing mitzvah hero, that's her. I met her on my first trip. I remember in my diary I wrote, I'm jealous. I wish I were a Sephardi, not knowing that Yemenites aren't Sephardim. But, and I used to eat their Shabbos dinner sometimes. And the first time I went, I never knew what the last course was. It was exotic food. And I kept eating, and then they'd bring out the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And for the milchig lunch, they had a general rule that whatever the highest fat cheese was, that's what they served. And it was very spooky. Last story, because I know we want to move on. The Rav, I've got it over there, did the most monumental commentary to the Rambam's Mishnah Torah. This is 23, 24 volumes. Every summer she'd give another volume as it came out. I said, I never called her bracha. I say harabbanit, or sometimes I speak to her in third person. Harabbanit, I can't take this. I can't take this because I give you tzedakah money and I can't do. And she says to me, take it because we're friends.
Wow.
Well, that kind of did it,
So moving from one mitzvah shiro in Israel to the United States, you wanted us to share a video clip, which we're going to momentarily, of a friend of yours, John Belzer. Can you say a word about who he is, and can you set it up, and then we'll enjoy this clip from the Today Show in a few moments.
John, by the many mitzvah heroes, sometimes I can remember how I found out about him, sometimes I don't. This one I know, but John founded a thing called Songs of Love, where they write individual, personalized songs for kids with life-threatening diseases. And they have written now, I was waiting to hear from John, they've probably written 30,000 of them. They have never turned down a request. They got a request from a woman, do you write for a kid who was mentally ill? One of my favorite stories is, you know, most of these kids die, but a kid calls John and says, John, I wore out the tape. Can I get another copy? Can you imagine that? And so we've had him, what he does is they do the song, they tape it, but they would not do the chorus. And they go to a place like some of our conferences, and we got to sing the chorus. They gave us the words. And then at the end they say, this song has been brought to you by Hasbro Toys. They had the staff do it. Or Tons of Cops or something like that. And then we all cheer.
Wow.
I have to tell you, I did that about 5 or 6 times. My friend Merrill flew John, I was doing a weekend for her out in California. She flew John out to surprise me. And this whole group of kids, we were going to sing, but it was the first time I ever had the kid there. The kid was about 2 or 3, sitting right in front of me with her father. And I wrote to Merrill and I said, what's new? Is she still in remission? Zoe is now 11 years old and in remission. You know, when you live a life, when you have these kind of moments, you wonder how you can, you know, go back to just making a cup of coffee or watching TV or anything like that. That's what's going to come in later, that I'm not spiritual. And you'll hear it with the thing, but I get my kicks from the mitzvahs. I can picture the kid right in front of me, but she's 11. Her name is Zoe Feldman. And the clip we're going to watch, he's been on every major TV show, is one of my favorites, because at the end, you'll see after he's talked to the kid, they're dancing in the kitchen. They have to picture the girl's about that tall and he's 6'4". So if you want to show the clip.
Yes, indeed.
How did we start it?
Tom will take care of it. It'll probably just take a moment.
They asked the kid what do they have a pet? What's their nickname? What kind of songs do they want? Country, Western, rock, or whatever. And it's all made just for that kid. And when a kid tells you when they play the song, I don't feel any pain, you know you're onto it. He's got, I don't know how many songwriters working for him. Working for them.
Tom, how are we doing? Is it frozen?
This is from the Today Show. I hope it happens. He was at Cage conferences. He was everywhere, and he's a very unassuming person. The story was he had a singing. They were a duo, and they wanted to become big rock stars. And she got hired, and he got left in the dust. And then he started Songs of Love.
Sometimes it's better to be left in the dust.
Yeah.
So let's move on. If we can come back to the video, we will.
Okay.
We apologize for the technical difficulties, but
Go to number 3.
Let's go to number 3. One of the beautiful things about the book is that it's a marvelous collection, and you can see the beautiful cover here in my hand, of texts of Torah learning and stories and practical wisdom. And so, just as you've shared with us these stories, I want you also to share with us a favorite piece of Torah, something that continues to inspire you.
Okay, if Tom will put it up, I'll be ready to roll.
Why don't you just
I'm nervous that we lost Tom.
why don't you read it? And
I wish I had the text in front of me, but, oh, yes, I do. No, I made a point of, oh, here it is. This rabbi, I spent 7 years at the Jewish Theological Seminary, so that's where my text background is from. Rabbi Dostai, the son of Rabbi Yanai Darash. It's a Darash doesn't mean he gave a drush, it means it's a public lecture. He says, Adam notain frutal ani zoche umekabel pnei shchina. If you get prutos like a penny, even if you give the minimum, the very smallest amount to somebody in need, you are get to be ushered into the intimate divine presence. Now that explains why I named my fund Ziv. There were two things. One is the Ziv of the mitzvah heroes, and the other is of the mitzvah itself.
beautiful.
There's something sublime that not only at moments when Hadassah says they were kids, or not only when you see my 50 US wires sitting around and Miriam Mendelow from Lifeline standing up there and this is the way you treat old people. Not only that, but you see something awesome. You think of all the Heschel kind of terms. Now, what struck me about it is the standard thing is everybody says there are 36 tzaddikim in the world upon which the world stands. Well, if you look a little closer, the first thing it says there are no less than 36.
Right.
So if you got past second grade math, is 123 greater than 36? You know? So that's why I put down the second text, which I hope we get Tom back. Abaye said, Lo pachot alma mitlatin v'shita tzadiki demekable apei shchina b'chol dora. He says there are no less than 36, not that the world stands on, that's a different text, that receive God's intimate presence every day. Well, this is text number 2. If, my friend Rabbi Porat told me that that tzaddik in our time, Aryeh Levin said, if there's an open slot among the 36 and they're down to 35, you could be the one that becomes that critical 36th. And so when you do the act of tzedakah, it's okay. Or it also says there are no less than 36 of them. Well, everybody that puts the dollar in the pushka, or everybody that is shopping for somebody who can't leave their house, or who does a pickup at the grocery store because they are vulnerable, and you have a car and you're willing to pick up the stuff and drop it outside the door, every one of those is the greater than the number 36. We're entitled to say to ourselves, for that moment, we have the ability to be a tzaddik. And by the way, for all of us who have doubts about ourselves, or who don't like ourselves, or who think we're really not worth something, this means that at any moment, we're entitled to think our best self is capable of doing this. And I really believe that. At any moment, no matter how we're feeling right now, we can turn that on. And I'm not a psychiatrist, but the feeling that doing the tzedakah gets you to see your better self and feel better about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the California idea of mitzvahs. You would rather feel good or feel bad. Well, if you want to feel good, this is one way to do it.
I dare say, Danny, that is also a way to experience the Ziv. That is, right? It is from without, but it's also within. That spark is a kind of ember that you have to cultivate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to dig real deep.
Yep.
I like that. The ziv is the spark. That's good, and you'll see it in. I mean, it's obviously in Kabbalistic literature. The ziv, you have ziv, of course, the ziv hashchina, but the ziv of the panim of Adam and other people, and we're entitled to, when you say to somebody, his face lit up, that could be from the ziv.
Right. Beautiful. Beautiful. So I want to take us to an interesting moment in the book, because it's a fairly thorough compilation of your teachings and experiences over many, many decades. So many of us have heard some of these teachings. Many of us were moved by these very words or the stories that you shared in the past. But among the new pieces that you included, interestingly, one that caught my attention is called tzedakah and tzedek.
Right.
Tzedakah and tzedek. Why did you feel the need to include that new piece? How is it reflective of your own experiences as a master of chesed, story, and doing? And how do you see the relationship between the two?
Well, it's interesting because Joy Weinberg is on with us. She was the editor from the JPS side. Neal was the editor from our side. Joy felt, not quite at the last minute, but close to it, that each of the 4 chapters of prose should have an update. Now that it's 2020, we should do something. And some of my further thinking about it. And the tzedakah and tzedek part picks up and takes further how over let me see, I started in 75, and this is 2020, that's 35, that's 55 years ago? No, 75, 20, 45 years ago, that I didn't intentionally neglect. I use the word tzedek, meaning societal change. Everybody would come to me and say, well, you feed the hungry person. What are you going to do to solve poverty? Well, that was not my intent, but I was so swept up with the individual acts and how impactful some things you do that are so small can really make a big difference, that I didn't spend as much time over the years figuring how letter writing, legislation, rallies in this case, change the face of society. In my day, obviously in the 60s, we had the war in Vietnam and we had civil rights. My dear friend Alan Gould, I think in the summer of 64, was it, went down to Mississippi for voter registration. He lived with a family down. I remember writing him a letter from the hotel before I left for Israel. Be careful. Well, he was like 25 miles from where they found the bodies of the three workers. Those were clear things. I mean, the war got stopped later on in 72 or so, but there was no question that those actions, which were so big, had an effect both on civil rights and on the war in Vietnam. So locally, like for example, the question is, with all of these rallies, and for anybody that's got any seichel knows, you're going to have a spike in the coronavirus. There's a way to have a rally of 10,000 people with social distancing, but that seemed to get thrown out the window. And we've seen the spikes. There is a way not to stop the rallies and still keep Jewish, that is to say, preserve our own lives and the lives of other people. I have tried in the last couple of years to take that more into account. I have some friends, Irwin Cotler, who was the Minister of Justice in Canada. You would know that, you're a Canadian. Irwin is a friend of mine. He was a member of Parliament for many years. Certainly systemically, I mean, if you're the Minister of Justice in Canada, you're working with giant issues by legislation, which can change so many things. And there's another one named Sam Daly Harris,
Mm-hmm.
who's in the States, who's the one introduced the microloans that were started by Muhammad Yunus to the world here. He is the one that has been having groups all for years and years and years, proving that your editorials, that your op-eds in the newspapers and your letters to the senators and so forth lead to those kind of systemic changes that we need. So I think when Joy asked me to do this, it got me to spend more time thinking about it. I don't want to, I can't split my time evenly. I just can't.
Right.
Because every day people, not every day, but people are writing me all the time and say, well, what should I do about this? And if I can say to them, well, check that text and look at that book and so forth, and start by every time you grocery shop, buy one extra item for tzedakah or so forth. That's the stuff I'm good at.
Right.
The other stuff I'm learning from other people still. I'll take one more example. The rabbi that raised Neal in Succothson, New Jersey, Rabbi Joel Soffen.
He's on the call.
Oh, he's on the call?
Yep.
Joel is one of my 2 or 3 great mitzvah heroes, along with Yitzhak Greenberg and the late Professor Eliezer Jaffe. Now, I don't know how much Joel over the years, Rabbi Soffen over the years, has done systemic stuff. I'm sure he has. But I can tell you that for a class that needs in Cambodia to continue their education, boom, he can do that. He can't solve Cambodia's recovery from the killing fields, the whole thing. And the same thing with the work he's doing in Rwanda and in Israel. But for certain, I have to tell, well, I had Joel tell the story before, but that doesn't mean, I'm just not aware. I know in his shul, 1, 2, 3, right after another, his ability to latch on to immediate situations was astonishing. I just found, where was it? I was reading Urbach's Chazal. He said there were some people that criticized people who were in charge of tzedakah funds who themselves weren't giving tzedakah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not bad-mouthing anybody, but those people that are involved in the systemic, it does mean federation. It can be the director of the Jewish Social Services Agency, or what we have Chiqueta here for battered women. They also have to take from their own money. They have to do the double side of it, just like I needed to beef up my side, because everybody's obligated. That's why the halacha says even a poor person who gets money from tzedakah has to do tzedakah.
I really appreciate the honesty, Danny, and the modeling also of continuing to learn and to grow.
Got to.
And that's very powerful coming from you, because you've developed a particular kind of expertise and modeled for people just how transformative these acts of chesed, including tzedakah, can be. And as you said so nicely before, with great anava, with great humility, and now you're also learning from others. And one of the things that I hope that the younger people on this Zoom experience appreciate is, without people like you who come along, and whether fully consciously or not, create new and different opportunities. And so that wasn't there in the ways that it is now. And the evolution of tzedek and tzedakah don't just happen randomly, of course, but it requires brave and bold people to say, I think we're missing something here, or we need to emphasize further this dimension of the work, or there's a corrective that's necessary. So it's important for me as someone that's a little bit younger than you, to say that out loud, and to just pause and appreciate that, from one generation to the next.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying. I like that, but I can think of two young people now that are recently have been expanding my stuff. There's Valerie Weisler. I knew her as a US wire, who has got thousands of, on bullying, thousands siding to kids and adults, called the Validation Project. And then there's something I had seen 13 years ago that came back to mind, that I was working with a bunch of kids in New Jersey, and a kid raises her hand and says, "My father is an angel pilot." These are the guys with the small planes that take people for treatments that otherwise couldn't get there from small airports, normally inaccessible to big planes and so forth. And for the last 3 days, I've been trying to write something about it. It's just been going through my mind over and over again, because there's so much to say about her. Because what she said was, and when I grow up, I want to be an angel pilot like my father. Which is just merely thinking about that whole area and thinking about Valerie, because I've been concerned about bullying, not just sex texting, but bullying in general. And here's a kid that has gone way, way beyond me because she knows how to do it technically. That's one of the main things I'm learning from. And that's why when Joy asked me, I didn't want to write any of my things. Well, now it's 2020 and it's all about technology. I mean, there's more to it than technology, but obviously I'm in the process of learning carefully. That's why if my voice doesn't come through, or, I get to scream at both my cell phone and my computer at least once a day.
So Danny, speaking of different parts of ourselves and the need for different kinds of work, one of my favorite moments as a rabbi over the years has been either during the high holidays or at some other point when I'm in shul, and in the midst of tefillah, I call on someone to read, a piece of poetry. And as the person is reading, they say, "Wait a moment, Danny Siegel, did he write this piece of liturgy or poetry? Is he the same guy that took me to Yad Kashish, or who taught me about doing a bar mitzvah project?" And I say, "Yep, same guy." This other part of yourself is very significant for many people who have looked to your work for tefillah in the formal sense, but also just for their own spiritual growth and edification. So I wanted to invite you to read two poems, two short ones. Both, of course, are related to everything that we've talked about, and reveal your sort of beautiful, poetic, impish self. So The Tree and the Mashiach, if you would, and then maybe say a word about what motivated it or how it feels reading it now, even though you wrote it, some time ago. And if Tom is able, we'll put it up on the screen. Otherwise, we'll just listen to you read.
Oh, there we go. First of all, I try to sit in the back of shul because I don't want the Kadosh Baruch Hu to find me. I just want to lay low. And that's why when Sim Shalom put one of my poems in, and as I told you, CCAR Press would call me every couple of years that when you put a poem in the Machzor or a Siddur or a this or that, I'm a little jumpy. I mean, I know they'll mean to people. And I wrote a whole book of my take on Psalms. And the fact is, you're right. Almost nobody knows about me being as a poet, except those people that are way, way back when I just started writing poetry. Most of them know me just from the mitzvah work. So this poem is clearly, it's from the Midrash, And incidentally, for all you Torah students who are wearing T-shirts that say Sefaria on it, or have coffee cups with Sefaria, which supposedly is the greatest repository of Jewish text, they do not have Solomon Schechter's version B of Avot to Rabbi Natan. It's based on that text, which simply says, if you have something you're going to plant in your hands, and somebody says the Mashiach is coming, you're not supposed to go running to greet the Mashiach. You're supposed to plant first. Any rabbi, any teacher, anybody can come up with 6 reasons for that. But I found that it was so graphic because as I looked at the text more closely the first time, it actually says what you've got in your hand. It's not like you're sitting in your living room and say, well, today I've got to put in the rose bushes. You're actually ready to do it. And somebody says, Mashiach's. And the Hebrew says not only is the Mashiach coming, but it may mean, hey, the Mashiach's right over there. It might. So let's see what I did with it. You picked it. If you are planting a tree and someone comes and says, the Mashiach is coming, then plant. No matter what reasonable people or foaming, enthusiastic youths tell you the Messiah or this Messiah or that Messiah is imminent, plant. The Mashiach is in no rush. When you have patted down the last clods of dirt and watered your maple, your sycamore, your elm, he will still be wherever he's supposed to be, he or she, and more than happy to admire the sapling with you. Messiahs don't come to uproot things. If he wanted to, he could bundle Eretz Yisrael into a package and bring it to you. So you would not have to go wandering again through many lands. If he really is the Mashiach, this one everybody pesters you about, he can bring you Abraham, who will sit by your tree and dispense dates and the flat bread of hospitality as in ancient days. So plant now firmly, water it well, whether or not there is a Messiah today or tomorrow. That's one of my more popular poems. It's called a Rebbe's Proverb, which I don't really know whether it was originally a proverb, I just wrote it up. If you always assume the person sitting next to you is the Messiah, waiting for some simple human kindness, you will soon come to weigh your words and watch your hands. And if that person so chooses not to be revealed in your time, it will not matter. Mm-hmm. What we have is a tree. And I'll just point out one other thing. I often will pick a plant or a tree or a bird or something, not because of what they look like, but because of the sound. There's nothing like a word like sycamore, which is what I put in there. I can't remember exactly what a sycamore looks like, but that's exactly why I put it in there. And the same thing visually of a foaming, enthusiastic youth, which is, I was thinking of all those who ran to communism when it first came out, all the Jewish people. And I also mentioned 1961, Dwight David Eisenhower was president. I can't remember whether there's that or Rutherford B. Hayes. I was on USY Israel pilgrimage and we planted a tree. Now for all who have planted, they give you something this size. And the joke was always some cat's gonna come along and step on it and that's it. But now my tree is almost 59 years old. I know the area where it was printed below Yad Vashem, and that's no joke. So if the Mashiach hasn't come by now, at least we've got some really big tree. Thank you.
The second one I asked you to.
Thank you for picking that one, by the way. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for writing it. The second one I asked you to read was With a Kiss, which I also think is just beautiful.
Okay, the background is very simple. At the age of 11, a kid in Philadelphia named Trevor Farrell saw on the TV, there was homeless people in Philadelphia, and he convinced his father to take him down to Center City. The myth is he took his own pillow and blankets. Not true. They were living very well. And he had many. And he admits when they went down and took care of, when they were going down to the city, he thought that was the homeless person in Philadelphia. Until when they were driving back, he started seeing others all over the place. And then from there, Trevor's campaign grew for 10 years every night, hundreds of volunteers and a shelter. And I went to meet him when he was about 14. He's the one that taught me, because as I took the train to Philly, and as I'm walking to go to the front door, the big plate glass window, and there was this kid hugging an adult homeless person. And he always referred to them as my friends, and they've been. It is the little, that's the zinger at the end. It's because of him. Is the little acts positioned in the day that make us. The kissing of the fallen book, which doesn't feel. Not using the Chumash, the Talmud, as a thing to lean on for other words, be they poetry books or tax forms. They take no precedence. Watch where you lean. Not mistaking a pushka for a paperweight. Kissing, again, the mezuzah we pass through or pass from. Both passages ordain, be cognizant. The covering of challah till the time wine blessed, tasted, hands washed is right. The kissing again of tzitzit. The kissing of the Torah scrolls when they are marched by. The kissing yet again before closing of the siddur. From these, the little acts, justice and menschlichkeit, lifting the fallen book we may, just may someday, lift the fallen neighbor, the stranger who feels with a kiss. That's definitely Trevor.
I think my favorite word in that poem is the may at the end, which you repeat.
Yes, and you know, sometimes I haven't looked at these poems for a long time. I say, "Oh, Siegel, not bad." You know, I gotta hand it to you. You know, often I'll ask the audience, how many of you, as a kid, even if you grew up in a basically assimilated home, knew that if you dropped a siddur or something like that, that you had to pick it up and kiss it? And I said, I was trained so well, I dropped a phone book once and I picked it up and kissed it. You know? But we learned, that, I think it's from those little things constantly. And then for Trevor to say, you know, these are people. Pick them up and kiss them.
Right. Yep.
By the way, I saw him again only about 3-4 years ago, in his 40s. He's got 2 daughters. He's now a driver for UPS. He has serious learning problems, so he was never going to be a Talmid Chacham. But he's very happy and he's doing good, and he's not one of these wonder childs who became all screwed up when he grew up. It was, what a reunion.
Wow.
By the way, we used to have Mitzvah Hero conferences. The first one was at the show when Neal was in New Jersey, in New Brunswick. And about, I don't know, the 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th one, we invited Trevor. And somebody else was speaking, but he walks in from the back and over to the side. And people are looking at this kid who's about 6'1", with the same face that they remember from the cover of the book and the video when he was about 13 or 14. And they knew immediately, this is the kid. The kid, which means the Rebbe. Okay.
So here's my last question for you, and then we'll see if people have questions or comments. And then we'll close with some reflections from Neal, who helped you put this beautiful book together.
Neal, excuse me, who helped me put the book together. He's the one that suggested I do this book.
Okay.
And I
And
said, I kept saying, nah, 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 nah. I don't know whether you ever seen in the museums a classic thumb screw from the Middle Ages. And he finally started tightening it. That's when I said, okay, we'll do it.
all right. So my last question is likely predictable given the global situation and the national situation. What eitzas might you have for us? You know, it's very difficult to try and do good right now for many people who are more isolated than ever, who, for the sake of their own health and the well-being of others, are isolated. And at the same time, as you said before, there are others that are taking to the streets for very good reason. So what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's sort of moving through you that you might want to share with us in this tumultuous moment? I hope and pray it's a transformative moment, but right now it's certainly a moment of reckoning.
Yiddish, you say it's schwer. It's really tough. There are a few things. I just wrote a short Dvar Torah called the Ganze Emes that I think as Jews, we have to be put much more effort into trying to figure out what out there that is flooding our heads visually and orally, what the real truth about certain things is. I mean, like every day you hear something new, like prisoners are very vulnerable. Or a month ago, I don't know whether people were talking about all the old people in nursing homes who are dying. And every time I see a cop, I ask, how are you guys doing? And how do you handle it if you have to just ask somebody for a driver's license and he hands you a driver's license, you have your gloves on? How do you know whether he's positive and whether that's going to transfer to you and so forth? And he says they no longer have the morning get together in the squad room. Once a week, they get together in a much bigger room so they can have social distancing. And I said, we really appreciate what you're doing, but you're under tough conditions, just like the fire people and the people at the post office. So that's one, is as new things come up, like all the rallies where people are bunched, and the stuff they're talking about opening the University of Virginia next year, even with giving every kid a mask and everybody getting some kind of a device that will automatically open the doors to the rooms and that kind of stuff. I'm still not sure. I don't know if you got a lecture hall of 200 people, have you got a room big enough at 6 feet each that you'll be the same problem for every rabbi that's going to Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur service. So that's number one. Number two, it is absolutely clear that every time a person calls a friend, whether or not they're handling the isolation or semi-isolation well, every call makes a difference. Every email. I've been pulling names from 20 years ago to write to somebody. I say, I haven't been in touch with you. First thing is, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. Not only physically, but how are you handling, being alone? And then I've been telling, and there's no question about benefit. I mean, there's apparently a spike in like Hallmark cards. People are deciding, in some cases, emails aren't enough. And they're handwriting notes to other people, which has a great impact on them. Because we can knock off 4 emails in the time it takes to handwrite something and to fix the package and the stamp and go to the post office. I have a friend from many years, his wife, I used to go over to the house once or twice a year. She cooks. The last delivery from him was a fine piece of trout. 2 times ago, it was cheesecake and cookies and some gesture at something healthy. And we meet downstairs, and he hands me a thing in the bag, but he's wearing a mask, I'm wearing a mask. And we spend 2 seconds talking, and that's it. That makes a big difference for people living alone. When you think of, again, going back to the old men with the rabbinate that may not get a hot meal. You know, I have plenty of food in the house, but what she's giving me can't be made on the George Foreman grill. And isn't prepackaged that you throw in 3 minutes from Trader Joe's. I mean, it's real food. All of that. I'll give you one more example. No, one more thing. That as much as we realize, like tonight, with so many of my friends and so many of your friends and so many of the people from Boston who have joined us, Zoom is wonderful. It gives us access. The first time I did this with Neal's gang, there were more people gathered than I had ever had before among my friends, ever in my whole life. On the other hand, I have to say, and you know this because you don't have any Talmidim in the building, the face-to-face human contact is irreplaceable. In fact, that's one of the midrashim that I like the most. It says when you see one of the tzaddikim, you're supposed to get up and you're supposed to hug them twice. And when you ask people why twice, you know, you get wonderful answers and so forth. But how much do we crave every time I write an email, just being able to hug somebody and to feel their shoulder blades or their bulk, or somebody would say, Siegel, you know, you've got to put some weight on. You've lost a lot because of trying to adjust your diet to your diabetes and so forth. And you got to find out a way to put another 5 or 6 pounds on. I mean, that they never find out until they found which bones that they didn't notice before. Or even just the first time as a kid, you see people in Europe kissing people on both cheeks. And some of my mitzvah heroes, that's the way we would do it. And there's no question it's going to be a revolution in the workplace. A lot of people are going to decide to telemark. There are people in this country, in this city, that are craving for the traffic jams again, which is called on the news sometimes sprawl and crawl. Mm-hmm. That's how bad Washington is.
Right.
But the devastation of the emptiness gets to them. I mean, this is wonderful. I mean, you guys have been, you know, we were originally going to do this live. And when we said, well, it ain't going to happen, do you want to continue with it? You guys were enthused for it the whole time. And I'm unbelievably grateful for this kind of a thing. My own shul is going to host one in about a month. But that doesn't mean, the last time I saw you, who knows how many years ago? Mm-hmm. It's frustrating. You're right there, but you're not. That's why the halacha says if you see a friend you haven't seen for 30 days, you make a shehechianu. And if you haven't seen them for a year, and if you haven't had any communication with letters and anything, you make a chaye meitim. It's like you had that fear that they were gone forever, and here they are again. Well, it's a great simcha to see you guys and everybody else on that list. Adina is the daughter of one of the great rabbis I remember from the 60s, Simcha Kling, who was in Greensboro in those days. I mean, all the memories, and there's Neal, of course, and all these memories that are stacked up, but it's not, in certain moments, it's not real enough. It just isn't.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate both the insight, the advice, and also just the pathos. I think your words resonate with many of us about the gifts and the limitations, of meeting like this. So I want to invite folks briefly to share some thoughts or to ask Danny a question. We're going to try and limit comments like, I remember the first time that I met you, because each of us could probably do that, and we'd be here for another few hours. But a question, a comment, something related to what he taught or shared this evening, or something related to the conversation and what's happening in the world around us. So if you want to just either raise your hand physically or do so with the emoji, we'll call on a couple of people. Reb Moshe.
By the way, the answer to the question is it being recorded?
Yes, it is.
Friend Rabbi Mark Hyman said his Wi-Fi is weak.
Yes, we're definitely recording.
Okay.
Reb Moshe, you have to unmute yourself. I'll try and help you.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Hi. Good to see you. You're looking good. Hope you're feeling good. Okay. Here's the question. There is a certain kind of reapprobation, if you will, of Talmud in some ways I've noticed in Israel. The idea it's being done in secular circles now. And I wondered if you've had any inkling of that, of the reinvestment in study, the Daf Yomi thing, the rejuvenation of that. It seems to be much more nafots spread out than I had expected it would be. Have you been getting intimations of this as well? And regards from Anne, by the way. Regards from Anne.
Thank you. Off and on, it's not only the Talmud study, but the guy that runs the Friday night service on the beach in Tel Aviv, where he gets hundreds of people. I heard him, and I'm getting lots of people that didn't used to do Daf Yomi, who are doing Daf Yomi now. In fact, my friend Arnie keeps sending me, by the way, did you know on Shabbos 23b is such and such? I said, thanks for reminding me. I haven't looked at it for a long time. The one thing that doesn't appeal, much more appeals to me, are all the women's groups, like what David Silber started on the Upper West Side, Drisha, because that's not a page by page necessarily. And I don't think Machon Hadar is doing page by page, because I'm not a person that can, I personally don't have the talent to sit. I don't have the Sitzfleisch to do that. But those that are doing it topically, like at the conservative yeshiva in Israel, there's two things. There's a Talmud, and it's at Pardes too. If you sign up for a Talmud class, you may have one that's going to go one after another. And for some minds, that's exactly what they want. They want to learn how to study Talmud. And for others, they want to know, like the Hartman Institute every summer has a theme, like Eretz Yisrael or something like that. So I'm in favor of the ones that do, like I don't know why I'm blanking on the women's yeshiva that's very prominent in Israel, because I did a couple of sessions there. I think all of those, the efflorescence is very positive. And I think for the ones that are doing it the ones who are intellectual and want to learn how to learn Talmud, fine. And the ones who are get this inkling that there's real values there and are willing to skip around topic by topic, both ways are reaching people who were raised thinking there's two kinds of people in Israel. There's the religious and there's the chiloni, the secular. And bunches of those chilonim are seeing it's no different than somebody who goes to Hebrew University and is majoring in physics, and all of a sudden, like my brother, decides to take biblical Aramaic with the great Yechezkel Kutcher, and winds up being a tremendous biblical philologue. So Moshe, I hear it probably once a month. I hear something new. or somebody sends me an article about it.
Other questions, comments?
That's it.
Yes. Hi, I'm from Washington, D.C. Thank you for mentioning that the person who goes out and shops for someone who is elderly or otherwise stuck at home during this pandemic is a tzaddik. As soon as I heard that, I sent a text to my friend who has taken it upon herself to shop for me every week and keep me supplied with kosher meat and produce. And I said, he says you're a tzaddik, but I knew that all along.
I think there's nothing wrong with telling people that. They may say, they may go, oh golly, or gee whiz, and scuff their shoe on the floor. But if not, if those things don't make us into somebody better than we think we are just doing, what was my big day yesterday? The most thrilling moment was I had come back, I bought 2 big bottles of soda and something else. I put them on the ground and I started putting stuff in the refrigerator and I accidentally knocked over 1 bottle. And so when I opened it, it spritzed things all over the place. That was the most exciting thing that happened yesterday. So when you have somebody who delivers the food, I'll give you one example. I've only been in the hospital, Baruch Hashem, maybe 3 times in my life, counting my tonsils when I was 2 or 3. When I was recovering from surgery at one point, my friend Steve Kerbel says he has some sweet and sour meatballs. Can he bring them over? You know how they say in Yiddish, it's like, these aren't meatballs, it's gold. It's like I made 2 meals out of it. And he lives like 1.5 miles away. He wasn't driving 30 miles to get it to me. That's why I've been teaching all along, there's no such thing as a small mitzvah. And I see it for myself now as the recipient. My sister passed away about 2.5, 3 months ago. So the funeral was the rabbi, the assistant rabbi of my shul who held the camera. My sister-in-law, her sister, and my niece. And it was a windy day. I'm going to look like an idiot because I had a baseball cap on because my yarmulke would have flown away. And Rabbi Berkowitz, my rabbi, could not stand close enough, and the wind was blowing, and they couldn't hear what was going on. And yet 20 or 25 people stayed on. I wasn't watching it, obviously. But what that meant to me was everybody took upon themselves the burden of this and wanted Danny to know that even if he couldn't see us, he knew we were there. That is certainly no small mitzvah. I mean, if you want big mitzvahs, you talk about Joy and Neal. My job is to write books. My job isn't to shape them or to edit them or to make them useful or reasonable or readable. The only thing is we're still negotiating with Spielberg on the movie rights. I just found out that what's his name? Searching for the Lost Ark. Who was the actor?
Ford.
He's turning 80, so I don't want him to play me. We're trying to figure out how to do it. But this never would have been, when we first saw I've written many, many books. The difference between a manuscript and a book is like, And Joy can tell you the struggles we went through until we finally found a picture that was okay to use. Otherwise, they may have had to delay this for 2 years. Who knows?
So with that, Danny, I want to turn things over to Rabbi Neal Gold, who you described before in humorous terms as the one who turned the screws, but thank you, Neal, on behalf of all of us for cajoling and then working with Danny to bring this project to fruition. So if you would just say a few words about the process and what you learned and what you would like us to take away this evening, and as we order many, many copies of the book for our friends and enemies.
That sounds like a good idea. Thanks, Or. First of all, I want to start with some words of gratitude. I'm so thankful and so grateful to you, Or, and to everybody at Hebrew College who, when we proposed doing this book launch, which we thought at the time and hoped would be in person, you know, you just, you said yes right away without even hesitation. And I'm really grateful to you, to Sharon, to Tom, and to Marilyn Stern, and everybody at Hebrew College who helped make this happen. I also want to share my gratitude with the people at Jewish Publication Society and the University of Nebraska Press who brought this book to be. Our editor, Joy Weinberg, is on this call, and it is such a better book because of her fabulous editorial skills. And my gratitude to everybody, to all the old friends and new who are participating in this tonight. But especially I want to thank my teacher, Danny Siegel, who trusted me with this project almost 4 years ago. And it has definitely been a love bringing it to fruition. When the book was published in April, it was at that moment, just when we were all making this switch, accommodating ourselves to our new lives online. And I sent out this announcement to my family and friends that the book had finally come out, and letting them know about it. And one of my teachers responded, when I heard that the book was coming out, my first response was, "Oi, this book is being published now of all times." And then I realized, yes, this book is being published now of all times. And I was really enthused by what he was saying, because he realized that one of the main ideas of the book and Danny's teaching is how communities and individuals take care of one another, especially the most vulnerable among us, and how we take care of the world around us. And the ideas in Danny's writings and in this book just fly off the pages about how each of us can do our most powerful mitzvah work. And that's a sublime thing. So why not now? At this time of distancing and staying at home, and a lot of us having time on our hands and figuring out how to stay connected with one another, this is a Danny Siegel sort of moment in our lives and in our communities. And that's why I'm really kind of proud and enthused that this book came out Dafka now at a time like this. Of course, we didn't expect when we started almost 4 years ago that this would be the conditions in which we find ourselves. So you invited me to say 1 or 2 words about why I wanted to do this book. First and foremost, I think that in an often unheralded sort of way, Danny Siegel is one of the shapers of American Jewish education. His impact has been that significant. And I guess I kind of wanted, in that unheralded way, I wanted him to be more heralded. That's a word. For putting personalized tzedakah and mitzvah projects into each of our hands and putting it on the agenda of the Jewish community. And I also thought then, and I still think now, that the more people who have this book in their hands, the more good will come into the world. It's that simple. And I also want to speak personally. This was also a labor of love for me because, well, I've only known Danny Siegel for 28 years. Not being sarcastic when I say only, because I can tell just from the chat on this webinar that there's a lot of people who go much further back with him than that, back to the 60s and to the heady days of USY and Jewish Theological Seminary and all of that. But I've also worked closely with Danny for a long time, including several great summers in Israel in the mid-1990s when I was in rabbinical school, and the time I spent with Danny and the mitzvah heroes who he introduced me to, and all those thousands of USY teenagers, really gave me a lot of grounding and a lot of focus about why I wanted to be in rabbinical school in the first place. And we have a lot of good stories and laughs from those times. For me, it gave me shape and focus to why I was interested in Jewish leadership in the first place. Because Danny has a way of cutting to the quick about what each of us is supposed to be doing. And towards that end, you know, one of the things I say in the introduction to this book is that Danny's teaching spills over so much that sometimes it demands a new vocabulary. I wrote about that in the introduction. I'd like to propose one new word for our vocabulary, one more piece of Torah that I want to share tonight. And that's this. There's a verse from chapter 12 towards the end of the book of Daniel. And I know this this pasuk is a favorite of Danny's because of some of the midrashim that are associated with it. I don't want to teach any elaborate midrashim or commentaries or anything. I just have one insight that I want to share about this. We all know, and we've thrown it around tonight, the word tzaddik. The word tzaddik, which means a righteous person, or in Danny's terminology in one of his books, a good person. And he just said a few minutes ago that we should be more comfortable about calling a tzaddik or a tzaddiket, calling them by that name. Well, here's the passage from Daniel. So, Maskilim yazhiru kazohar harakia, the knowledgeable will be radiant. There's that word again, radiant, like the bright expanse of the sky. And then this word, umatzdikeha rabim, kakochavim la'olam va'ed, that those who bring others, bring the community to be tzaddikim are like the stars forever and ever. And I'm interested in that phrase, matzdikei harabim. A tzaddik is somebody who literally is the exemplar of tzedakah and tzedakah. So a matzdik, which is a less familiar word to us, but one that I'd propose we become more confident with. A matzdik is somebody who inspires others to do the work